The anime starts by showing us the prestigious Regarden Magical Academy, where what is valued most highly is a talent for magic, naturally. Despite this, our protagonist, Will Surfort, has no aptitude for it at all, and he's unable to use even the most basic of magics. He's only a book learner, so he's an honor student when it comes to note-taking, but it isn't something anyone admires. After all, most people believe that in this world, the supremacy of magic is absolute, because their heroes are mages. The most powerful wizards, the Magiavander, are the ones who uphold the sky. Long ago, people knew nothing of the sky, so they were trapped in darkness, and the world was terrorized by the celestial host until 5 wizards rose up against them. These wizards turned back the invaders, and they cast a seal over the sky, bringing peace to their world. The Magiavander is a title that has been passed down ever since, given only to the strongest. That's why everyone dreams of it at least once, the honor of becoming a mage. In Will's case, he made a promise with his childhood friend Elfaria, saying that they would reach the top of the tower one day to get as close as they can to the sky and become Magiavander to see the sunset that hides behind it. It was nothing more than an innocent childhood promise, but Elfaria was the real thing. With her talent, she became the youngest ever to earn the Magiavander title and left for the top of the tower. As for Will, being talentless, he's even less than mediocre, but unable to give up on the promise they made that day, he's still scrambling, even now, to achieve his dream of standing beside her. One day at the academy, his professor, Werkner Norgrim, scolds him for hitting the dungeon without permission again and going to the 7th floor solo. Despite this, he knows that Will needs those credits to become a Magiavander, which is why he usually goes to the dungeon to defeat monsters. Even so, Werkner reminds him that before he heads to the tower, he needs to advance to the Upper Institute, and to do that, he'll need writing, spell work, and praxis. He needs a tremendous amount of credits from the 3 curricula, and since he can't use magic, he'll never be able to earn spell work credits. Will clarifies that he already knows that, and that's why he's focusing on praxis, collecting credits in the dungeon. Werkner cuts him off before he can finish his sentence, and warns him that advancing through praxis alone is effectively impossible, especially for someone who can't use magic. Will's expression turns slightly sad because he knows it's true, but he's not ready to give up just yet. Werkner asks him to stop thinking about becoming a Magiavander when he may not even graduate. He also mentions that he already knows that he failed to earn any credits on his most recent exams, which means he needs to earn 4 credits by the end of the week. There are only 2 days left, so Will panics and tries to search in his notes for any 4-credit monster. Werkner casually mentions that there have been reports of a Baskerville on the 6th floor, a monster Will hasn't defeated yet. Will hugs his professor without a doubt to thank him, but they don't notice that one of Will's classmates, Cyan Ulster, heard them. Cyan immediately starts plotting something against Will because he really wants to get rid of him, since he thinks he's just a no-talent who's out of his league. Will soon heads to the 6th floor of the dungeon with his familiar Kiki to find the monster and get 4 credits. In the meantime, Cyan and his friends, Lyral Mars and Gordon Barrett, also dive into the 6th floor of the dungeon, planning to get rid of the monster themselves to steal the credits, because they don't want Will in the academy. Cyan firmly believes that a guy who can't use magic shouldn't even speak of the Magiavander, so the very sight of him offends him. They have an easy task, defeating the Baskerville before Will can. However, their plans are completely ruined when a different monster attacks them. Gordon gets crushed against the wall with a single brutal blow, so Lyral panics and screams, casting spells to try to save his life. Will manages to hear that scream, so he immediately runs to the place to see what's going on, and notices that his classmates are being attacked by an evil sentinel, a 10-credit dangerous monster. The sentinel's habitat should be deeper down, so it doesn't make sense that it came up to this floor. Cyan's magic isn't having any effect against the monster, because an evil sentinel is on a whole other level. Despite Cyan's poor treatment against him, Will decides to step in to help him, because Elfaria once told him that he was kind and braver than anyone. He actually disagrees, because the only thing he wants is to be worthy of her, which is why he'll become like a lone sword at the very least. As Will lunges at the evil sentinel without a second thought, Professor Edward Serfants barges into Werkner's office to inform him that Cyan went to the 6th floor of the dungeon without permission. Even though this normally would have been alarming, Werkner tells him that it'll be alright, because Will is there. He uses a magic device that allows them to see what's going on the 6th floor through Kiki's eyes. Thanks to that, they actually see Will brutally fighting against the evil sentinel, crushing it with his sheer strength. Edward can barely believe what he's seeing, because, just like Cyan, he firmly thinks that Will is a failure just because he can't use magic. Werkner informs him that Will is actually a true outlier, because he has superhuman strength a mage would never possess, a physique as robust as a dwarf's, and the observational skills to grasp an enemy's strategies after seeing them just once. It's true that Will can't use the slightest bit of magic, but in this world full of magic, he's the one and only warrior. During the fierce battle, Will's sword even cuts through the evil sentinel's magic, and with only a slash of his sword that surpasses even lightning, he slices the monster in half, destroying everything around. Immediately after defeating the evil sentinel, Will approaches Cyan to check on him. However, Cyan is totally infuriated, just like Professor Edward, who refuses to stand for this because he can't believe that someone who can't even use magic is able to surpass it. Now we see a memory of 5 years ago, when Will was only 10 years old and Elfaria had just become a Magiavander. The academy headmistress, Cauldron Anuv, decided to put Will to the test, despite what everyone said about him not being able to use magic. Will's skills with the sword truly left her speechless, so she decided to allow him to continue attending the academy. After all, the concept of a sword yearning to be a wand was interesting to her. Since then, Will has been trying hard, despite what everyone says, because he wants to ascend to the tower. Back to the present time, Werkner explains that to ascend the tower generally means advancing to the upper institute. To become one of the Magia Vander who reign from the topmost floor of Mercedes Kaulis, they must be recognized by the highest center of learning, the upper institute. There are two principal methods of advancement: to create a new type of magic or to earn at least 7,200 credits at their academy. Only a limited number of people can achieve the former, which means the majority of students must rely on the latter. However, Werkner warns the whole class that everyone is in danger of not making graduation, much less the upper institute. After a harsh supplementary class, Will meets with his friend Colette Loire, and as they walk through the halls of the academy, they find Cyan's friends talking about the evil sentinel of the 6th floor. They tell everyone that Cyan is the one who defeated the evil sentinel by himself, but Cyan is the only one who knows the truth, and he's completely furious about it. On the other hand, Professor Edward meets with the headmistress and tells her that Will Surfort should be expelled. Cauldron reminds him that Will is already in his 6th and final year at the academy, so they can't expel him now when he's come this far. Edward still firmly tells her that this academy has no need of anyone who is a warrior and not a mage, because there's no way someone can surpass magic without being able to use it. Despite all his complaints, Cauldron assures him that if they ignore the fact that Will can't use magic, he still excels to the degree that calling it mere excellence is insufficient. Because of that, she believes that he could become an artificer or a healer, and there are many paths open to him. Cauldron reminds him that this academy has a duty to produce learned scholars for the fated day. Edward clarifies that the boy in question doesn't seek to be a learned scholar, but a Magia Vander. Cauldron admits that that's a problem in this case, so she decides to allow Edward to give Will a test. Without wasting any time, Edward finds Will and brings him to the academy spell hall with him, saying that he can't overlook how he continues to fail spell work, so he'll give him a supplemental lesson. Edward informs him that his assignment is to land a single strike on him, and if he succeeds, he will award him 5 spell work credits. However, if he fails, he will have him leave this academy for good, because those without talent should not be permitted to even look upon the Magia Vander. Before giving him any time to answer, Edward starts casting magic spells against Will without mercy. Will can't do anything but dodge the destructive spells, knowing that he doesn't stand a chance against them, because Edward is the closest to actually becoming a Magia Vander, and his magic speaks for him. He only uses low-level dark magic spells, and yet Will is overwhelmed by his power. Despite this, he tries to use his superhuman speed to reach him and land a hit, but Edward's defenses are also impeccable. He's casting spells with no incantations, and there's not one hole in his offense or defense. Will can't even scratch him, and Edward doesn't give him a break from his constant attacks. While Will is on the floor, Edward talks about the Battle of Garzaronso Will admires so much. He mentions that the foolish dwarves incited a rebellion with a force of 10,000, but it took only one mage to quell the battle. With a wave of a wand, 10,000 dwarven warriors were annihilated, because that's the way of this world, and a sword will never reach a wand. Edward tries to discourage him, and asks him what noble reason lives in his heart for him to want to become a Magia Vander. Despite how beaten up he is, Will stands up with determination, holding the goggles Elfaria gave him as a gift once, and he tells his professor that he really wants to be with the person he loves. That answer leaves Edward completely speechless, but Will stands his ground and tells him that he wants to keep the promise he made with Elfaria. Even if his reason seems ridiculous to him, and no matter how harsh his path may be, he will go see the sunset with her. Edward is completely furious now, and he's more than ready to put an end to this. However, Colette arrives just in time thanks to Kiki, and she gives Will the one thing he needs to be able to fight his professor, a sword. Edward still believes that there's nothing he can do against magic with a mere sword, but to his surprise, Will uses his sword to slice through his spell. Despite how terrified he is, Will faces him head-on and fights, dodging Edward's destructive spells at high speed. He thinks about the Battle of Garzaronso again, knowing that there's more to the story. A brave dwarven general named Gareth fought even as he lost all his brethren, and in spite of everything, he landed a single blow. In honor of his bravery, the mages recognized the dwarves' status. After all, a sword saw a wand and reached it. Will honors that story himself, and manages to break through Edward's defenses in the blink of an eye, attacking from a blind spot overhead. Before he knows it, his sword reaches Edward, creating a small cut on his cheek. As soon as that happens, Edward turns around to leave, and tells him that he's earned the 5 credits. Sometime after that, Will reads in the newspaper that Elfaria created a new original magic, becoming the first to achieve the remarkable feat of inventing 12 magics. Subsequently, the Upper Institute has passed an order down to the entire academy, and the client is Elfaria herself. As soon as Will reads about that, he goes back to his dorm to see his roommate, Rosti Noman, and asks him to make him a magic item. He explains that the order is to collect Frostwalker ice cores, because Elfaria apparently needs a lot of magic catalysts, and all contributing students will be compensated. Fortunately, Rosti already had something prepared for him, and mentions that he's made improvements to the previous version of his magic item. With that, Will immediately heads to the 4th floor of the dungeon, where a lot of students students are already working to fulfill Elfaria's request. Since there are way too many students, Will decides to go to a more secluded area, and he ends up saving a fourth-year student named Iris Churchill from some monsters. Despite knowing who he is, Iris is still kind to him, so Will asks her if she doesn't feel any kind of disdain toward him for being talentless. Iris simply tells him that she couldn't possibly look down on the person who saved her, and explains that even if he can't use magic, she has a heartfelt respect for people with their own gifts. That aside, she mentions that she's also here for Elfaria's request, because she wants to be of use to the Magiavander and become one of the people holding up the sky. Will remains silent, knowing that she's not joking about that. They actually don't know the real sky, and even now, their world is hidden, because the tremendous magical energies of the Magiavander cloak everything, creating a false sky known as the Great Barrier. According to the lore, when the barrier falls, the world will once again be enveloped in darkness, and the calamity will begin. The students strive to meet orders not only because they admire the Magiavander, but also because they believe it will help to support the sky. Iris mentions that everyone else must have defeated all the remaining Frostwalkers at this point, because she can't find any even with her location magic. Despite this, Will notices a great amount of ice fragments, which leads him to a powerful Frostwalker no one else could detect. Iris tries to stop him, because she knows that he can't use magic, but Will thinks that magic isn't absolute, especially not inside the dungeon. He also has some knowledge and wisdom, and he believes that experience can make up for the rest. To their surprise, they don't find a normal Frostwalker, but a giant Frost Rex, the highest form of Frostwalker, which is worth 6 credits. This over 5 enemy is a special monster specific to floor 4, but despite how dangerous it is, Will manages to defeat it, using the magic items Rosti made for him. Later, at Mercedes Cowlis, the Wizard's Tower, Iris meets with 4 of the Magiavander: Cariot Incendia Wiseman, Eleanor Leos Alf, Zeo Thorzeus Reinbolt, and Elfaria Albus Surfort. There, Iris informs them that in her observation of the Academy, she discovered one interesting prospect, and she recommends Will Surfort for a position in the tower. Elfaria remains silent, while Cariot and Eleanor refuse without a doubt, and only Zeo finds the idea interesting, since he'd even take a dwarf if they're useful. Even though Eleanor disagrees with him, Zeo reminds her that it's nearly time for the Grand Magic Festival, so they can wait to make a decision until after they see those results. Later, it is explained that of the 12,000 total credits available at the Academy, 7,200 credits are required for a student to advance to the Upper Institute, an absolute condition for becoming a Magiavander. Rihanna Owensaus, Wignall Lindor, and Julius Reinberg are the only ones with over 10,000 credits. A student's credits are like an index by which their skills can be judged, so it's clear for everyone that those 3 are going to the Upper Institute. On the other hand, Will doesn't even have enough to graduate, since he only has 5,405 credits. Because of that, Colette tells him that he should participate in the Magic Festival, since there's a precedent for a student being scouted and ascending the tower on the spot. She reminds him that the Grand Magic Festival is a contest between students from the different tower factions, so this is where advancement to the tower is decided. The factions are the Lightning Lord's Wand, Thorzeus Fash, the Sacred Elf's Wand, Eliaf Cannon, the Flame Emperor's Wand, Incendia Barham, and the Ice Maiden's Wand, Albus Vina. Setting aside the Light Sovereign's Wand, Mysteria's Noah, the current Magiavander lead these 4 major factions. Despite how tempting it sounds, Will reminds her that skipping the requirements for graduation and going straight to the tower hardly ever happens. Plus, he already tried to participate once, and since he can't use magic at all, people didn't take it very well. Even though he decided not to go, Will changes his mind that night after trying to defend his dwarven friends from Julius. Long ago, when the dwarves' world was destroyed by the celestial host, they escaped to their world. Unlike the elves, dwarves are treated with disdain, so if a dwarf were to lay hands on a mage, their standing would instantly be in danger. However, the dwarves are very dear friends to Will, and he's really fond of them, so when Julius enters the tavern he works at just to insult them, he can't stand it. He tries to make Julius take back those insults, and ends up throwing a drink on his head while taking down his friends. Julius covers the whole place in ice out of rage, and asks Will to enter the Grand Magic Festival, because he wants to humiliate him in front of everyone. Will accepts without a doubt, because he's seriously angry this time, and if he wins, he wants Julius to apologize to Donnan and his other dwarven friends. A few days later, the Grand Magic Festival finally opens, and Colette somehow finds a way to get Scion on her team, leaving out the fact that Will is going to participate. Scion is not really happy when he finds out, but Colette explains that in order to participate in the crown attack, the team must have at least 21,000 combined credits, so their only option was inviting him. The crown attack is the main event of the Grand Magic Festival, and unlike the other events, this is a team competition held between 3-man cells. Teams start at the outer edge of the field and make their way to the central stadium, where the first team to take the crown wins. The elite professors have arranged a veritable mountain of traps for them, though, so it won't be an easy task. As soon as the event starts, the public is left speechless when Will completely crushes a golem with a magic gauntlet Colette made for him. They can easily advance thanks to that, but Scion is still very displeased by the situation. He still thinks about the time Will saved him that time, but he feels like he'd rather have died than forgive himself for that. Everyone is surprised by how easily they go forward thanks to Will, because because he moves like someone who spends all their time in the dungeon. His knowledge and experience have purged him of any inefficiency, and his reflexes bestow him the opportunity to break through. In no time, his team reaches the final area before the central stadium, the Enchanted Woods. However, even though they have the lead, Julius takes them by surprise with an ambush. All of his ice attacks are melted the second Cyan starts a powerful fire incantation and attacks him with a dangerous Iflam Berdelion. This spell is also directed to Will, and if Colette hadn't protected him in time, he would have been burnt to a crisp. The attack is so powerful that the shockwave even reaches the central stadium, shocking everyone in the public. Will is still trying to process what just happened, and to his surprise, Cyan asks Julius to leave, saying that he's in the way. He then asks Will to fight him, and before Colette can interfere, Julius suddenly blocks her. She doesn't understand how he escaped the bombardment, but she's forced to fight Julius alone. Will tries to reason with Cyan, but he soon realizes that there's just no way, so he'll have to fight him here and now. In a fragment of the past, we see what Cyan really used to think about Will. He thought he was pathetic from the very beginning, and that's why decided that he'd make him less painful to watch. To take away all the constant bullying towards Will, Cyan tried to offer him being one of his underlings, because that way he wouldn't feel so wretched all the time. To his surprise, Will simply ignored him and walked away. He never even once saw them blotting the landscape, because to him, they were the invisible ones. Ever since that day, Cyan has despised him, so now he's fighting him with everything he has, hoping that Will finally acknowledges him and fights him back. However, Will only dodges his attacks and refuses to fight back because they're on the same team, and there's no time for this right now. Cyan still stubbornly insists and warns him that he'll just burn him to cinders if he's not going to fight. While he attacks him with another blast, Colette tries to escape from Julius, but she ends up falling into a trap. Soon the public realizes that there's something weird going on, because they can see Julius in different locations of the map at the same time. Meanwhile, Will tries to understand why Cyan is acting like this, and why everyone has always mistreated him, since he knew better than anyone what a failure he is. He didn't want to ask them to accept him, because he'd never asked something so selfish, so he just wanted them to leave him alone. That's why he pushed Cyan away at first, because he didn't have time, and he couldn't afford to look away from his goal. However, he can't look away now that Cyan is fighting him with all his might, getting to the point of summoning a guardian, Halcon Gardinus, a falcon made of flames. Will thinks fast and cuts the falcon's wings before trying to reach Cyan, but to his surprise, the falcon has high-speed regeneration. Guardians are mainly used to defend and buy time for an incantation, but this one is attacking from all directions. While he focuses on dodging the guardian, Cyan prepares a high-level fire spell and attacks him with Iflam Berdelion. Will somehow manages to block the attack with his gauntlet and barely redirects the blast behind him. The sheer power of that explosion leaves the public completely speechless, and some of the watchers in charge of recruiting students for the tower see potential in Cyan. Will can tell that he's become a lot stronger, but Cyan isn't satisfied and tells him that he was better than this when he defeated the evil sentinel. Cyan can't understand how he doesn't resent him after being so ridiculed and suffering such humiliation for so long. Will clarifies that he does resent him, and he's actually furious because he's lost count of the times he's imagined getting back at him, but right now, he has to beat Julius, so he doesn't have time for this. Cyan gets even more angry and frustrated by that, and confesses that watching him refuse to give up even though he's just a no-talent infuriates him, and yet, he doesn't understand why he's always looking everywhere but at him. Will is stunned into silence at that, and he finally understands how Cyan really sees him. In truth, even though he refused to let people accept him because he thought it'd be selfish, somewhere deep in his heart, that's actually what he wanted. That's why, if it means Cyan will acknowledge him, then Will is going to meet his challenge with everything he has. Cyan is glad to see that Will is finally going to fight back, so he immediately attacks with wide-scale destruction magic and a guardian strike simultaneously. Even so, Will gives up on defending against his destruction magic and slices through the guardian's core with his sword instead. However, right when they're about to land the decisive strike, Colette interrupts them and blocks their path with a giant earth wall. She explains that she beat Julius, but he suddenly disappeared on her without a warning. Without wasting more time, Colette asks Will to go on ahead because she knows that he's got a score to settle with Julius. Cyan tries to protest, but Colette keeps him at bay, so Will thanks her before leaving and tells Cyan that they can have a real fight next time. Julius's team is first to reach the central stadium, but just as they're about to claim the crown, Will lands on the stadium with great force and challenges him without a doubt. Julius congratulates him for making it this far, saying that if he won a landslide victory without humiliating him, it wouldn't satisfy him in the least. Will reassures him and clarifies that until he apologizes to Donnan and the others, he has no intention of losing. As soon as the battle begins, Julius covers everything with a smokescreen, and Will soon realizes that the three of them plan to surround him. After blocking an attack that comes from behind, he immediately starts running, because he knows that they'll get him if he stops. Even with his vision obscured, he can judge their locations by their attacks, or that's what he thinks. However, when he finally finds Julius, another attack suddenly hits him from the side. Will soon realizes that Julius's teammates are right next to him, standing on their initial spot, and Julius lets him know that they haven't even moved a single step yet. When the smokescreen finally disperses, everyone is shocked to see several copies of Julius in the arena. Julius casually mentions that his other copies explode, so Will immediately braces braces himself when the copy right in front of him suddenly bursts. His body ends up mostly frozen, but the audience is still trying to process the magic Julius used. After all, it's the secret arts discovered by the peerless genius Elfaria, El Glass Frost. Those 12 spells are Elfaria's masterpiece, for which the term serial magic was coined. Will knows that Julius is using one of those 12 spells. L1, Ars Weiss, a spell that creates icy copies of its caster. He immediately asks him how he's using Elfaria's magic, but Julius just starts laughing and tells him that it's natural talent. He explains that he learned this secret art by studying on his own, and though only in part, he's reached the heights of a Magia Wander, so he thinks Albus Vina isn't so impressive after all. Will's reaction lets him know how much that comment really affected him, so Julius continues talking and says that he'll expose Elfaria for all to see one day. That statement alone is enough for Will to break free from the ice out of rage, but he's soon attacked by the other copies of Julius from different directions. Julius warns him that his doubles move exactly as he wishes, and they can use magic. Before he knows it, Will is surrounded by his doubles, but they suddenly stop attacking him and enclose him in a cage Julius crafted just for him. He then lets a giant block of ice fall on him, shocking everyone in the public because he won without taking a single step. Julius doesn't waste any time and addresses the scouts in the crowd, saying that after acquiring Albus Vina's secret art, his ice magic is utterly indomitable. That way, he will prove to them that he is Elfaria's successor. Iris soon realizes that Julius did all of this as a demonstration, and he played Will, who's as quick and agile as a monster. Rosti doesn't look concerned at all, though, and he mentions that Julius would look pathetic if he doesn't win now. After all his bragging, Julius suddenly hears a crack, and soon, Will breaks through the giant block of ice and thanks him, saying that his magic helped him cool off. He admits that it's a bad habit of his, but when it comes to Elfaria, he always gets hot-headed. Julius gets frustrated and tries to end him right there, but Will easily dodges his attacks and tells him that his Ars Weiss isn't perfect. He then takes down Julius's teammates, leaving him alone, and all his copies soon crumble apart. Will explains that Julius was controlling his doubles with his teammates' support. He can use Elfaria's magic briefly, but no more than that, so he's nowhere close to being her match. His Ars Weiss isn't perfect, because unlike Guardians, which can act on their own, Ars Weiss must be actively controlled, so Julius relied on his teammates to help him maneuver the spell. Julius gets furious by his words and attacks him while saying that a no-talent like him has no right to speak as if he knows everything. Will uses his sword and speed to dodge and block all of the attacks, but Julius is still able to control 4 of his doubles, which are identical to him. Despite this, Will can easily tell which one is the real one, and he finds him right away, taking him off guard. Will explains that the internal temperature of Ars Weiss is the exact opposite of its caster, minus 36 to 37 degrees, and it can go lower depending on other magic cast. If the doubles aren't controlled perfectly, the cold leaks out, and just like with Frostwalkers, ice crystals form at their feet. Julius suddenly notices that the doubles he created indeed have ice crystals at their feet, proving Will's point. This makes him feel even more frustrated, so he asks him how a no-talent like him knows the spell better than he does. Will explains that Elfaria and he are childhood friends, and they were raised at the same orphanage. That's how he knows her magic so well, because he admired it and studied it, though he just couldn't catch up to her. Will informs Julius that he knows all the strengths and weaknesses of Elfaria's magic because of that. Julius explodes in rage and asks him to stop spewing nonsense, saying that she's Albus Vina, so this is the secret art of a Magia Wander, and no lowly no-talent could ever hope to best it. He attacks again without thinking, but Will easily cuts through his spell and admits that he's incredible, because until now, no mage has been able to reproduce Elfaria's magic. However, he clarifies that Ars Weiss is a spell she invented when she was only 2 years old, so it isn't perfect and it has its weaknesses. Julius completely freezes in shock after hearing that, trying to process the unbelievable information. After all, he was elated when he grasped this spell, yet Elfaria invented it when she was only 2 years old, which means he's on the same level as a toddler. Out of sheer rage, Julius casts Ars Weiss again, and he increases the number of his doubles to 8, saying that control doesn't matter. Will isn't intimidated by this in the slightest, and he explains that he recalls being tormented by 10 Elfarius when they were kids, so this is no challenge for him. Blinded by his anger, Julius attacks him non-stop, trying to crush him, but Will destroys each one of his doubles one by one until he finally reaches the real Julius and ends him with a crushing blow from his fist. Everyone in the crowd is thrilled by Will's incredible victory, but just then, Wignar Lindor claims the crown, saying that while they were busy with their duel, he took the liberty of winning this game. Just like that, the crown attack comes to a conclusion, and even though they didn't win, Will is glad that he was able to keep his promise. Soon after that, the dwarves hold a celebration to thank Will, because he was victorious and they got their apology from Julius, who's now forced to work at their tavern under Gina's command. Now, it's almost time for the all-student praxis, a whole week of exploring the dungeon. After his display at the Grand Magic Festival, Will has become popular at the academy, and now plenty of students are trying to get him in their party for the all-student praxis. Colette tries to get him out of that situation, but Will is actually beaming in happiness, wondering if this is what having friends is like. Despite this, she still drags him away from them and makes up an excuse, saying that they have to go shopping. Even though it was the perfect opportunity to have a date, Rosti invites himself to get in the way, and he makes sure to push all her buttons by getting as close to Will as he can. Colette loses her composure in no time, so so Rosti decides to have a chat with her alone after Will leaves to give his sword some maintenance. However, before he can get to the forge, Will runs into Lihanna Owenzos, who's known as Miss Perfect for acquiring every credit in writing, spell work, and praxis. Without giving him any explanation, she just asks him to go with her and takes him to a room where Julius, Wignall, and Sion are waiting for her. There, she explains that in the latter half of their final year at the academy, the all-student praxis will take place, so she would like the 5 of them to form a party. Sion and Julius are obviously against this, but Wignall decides to listen to her, and Lihanna explains that, in addition to the greatest mages of their year, she'd like to add Will. After all, he is the boy who stood out so prominently at the Grand Magic Festival, and he possesses something that they don't, which will prove useful in the dungeon. Julius questions her judgment and says that someone who can't even cast search in the dungeon will only hold them back. Sion agrees and says that he doesn't want to be in a party with him again, but Wignall tells them that their pride and hostility is completely pointless. He tells Julius that the fact that he dares to look down on someone who has defeated him makes him doubt his character. Julius reminds him that in terms of credits, Lihanna has outdone even him, but Wignall doesn't deny it and tells him that that's why he has the utmost respect for her. So, if this is her determination, then he will defer to her even in the selection of the talentless. Lihanna clarifies that she wants to use all of them, including Wignall, to be the top of their class and ascend the tower. She seeks even greater renown than her current standing, and her eyes are on the future. Lihanna explains that those who still remain at the academy are leftovers, so they're inferior, and that's why she wants to push so hard right now. She mentions that she comes from House Owenzos, and in general, they are short-lived, so she must achieve overwhelming accomplishments to forestall her family's ruin. Simply ascending the tower isn't enough, so what she needs is to become a Magiavander. She knows that all of them are ambitious as well, so if they see the benefit to be had, she'd like them to place the coin by their hand into the cup. Wignall agrees without a doubt, and the others also place their coins into the cup, knowing that no other party could possibly reap better results in battle. Of course, Will also decides to place his coin into the cup, so he soon informs Colette and Rosti that he'll be doing the all-student praxis with Lihanna's party. Soon after that, Werkner informs the class that the all-student praxis is 10 days away. For a limited time, floors 7 through 10 will be unlocked, so they'll be able to defeat over 5 enemies and other monsters worth even more credits. This is their only chance to earn over 1,000 credits at once, and in particular, defeating floor keeps will net them a tidy sum of credits. That's why they should use this to make up for any credits they're missing, or show what they're really made of and use it as a stepping stone to the tower. Edward warns them that some of them will die in the process, and just last year, 4 students were eaten by monsters. He explains that during the exercise, professors will be stationed within the dungeon, but that won't prevent violent deaths in its depths, so they must know their place and steel their resolve. The day of the all-student praxis finally arrives, so all the students head to the base camp on the 6th floor of the dungeon. Colette decides to stick with Will, even though she wasn't invited to Lihanna's party. On the other hand, Rosti stays on the 6th floor, because the students in the artificing track are stationed at base camp. He still made a lot of magic items for Will, though, to help him through the all-student praxis, also known as the field intensive. Before they begin, Edward reminds them that their time limit is a week, and unlike usual praxis, they will dive into the dungeon and try to survive. Werkner mentions that there's a base camp set up on each floor, so they must make sure to check their locations on the maps they've received. At the conclusion of the praxis, or if they choose to retire, they have to make sure to evacuate to a safe area, and professors will be on standby. Once this is clear, the all-student praxis finally begins, so the students dive into the dungeon. In another scene, a mysterious man complains about his job in the dungeon, saying that he can't believe that he was sent here when the kids are holding that festival of theirs. That leaves him with no choice but to slaughter his way through after all. Meanwhile, even though Will tries to do everything he can to be of any help in the party, the others don't even let him, overwhelming him with their power. He soon finds out that the Owenzoses are a line of knights, and Lihanna is rare among mages because she specializes in close quarters combat. Will can't sense enemies fast enough, and Julius and the others are using search magic to perceive a larger area than his senses can. At this rate, they'll clean up all of the monsters before he can intercept any. Just when he finally manages to kill one, Wignall casts a spell that wipes them all out in one go. He then tells him that he's more of a burden than he thought he'd be because he hasn't even fulfilled his role as a shield. Lihanna clarifies that he simply hasn't had time to act as a shield, but he will show his true strength against over 5 enemies, probably. Her uncertainty hurts Will more than she realizes, and Julius still thinks that he will only hold them back. After a while, Lihanna decides that it's time for them to take a break, so Will distributes the rations she gave him before. Wignall doesn't let him get any close though, and he clarifies that elves only allow those they deem worthy to touch them. Like dwarves, elves come from another world, but they're magic users, a gifted and highly revered race. They value their own kind over others and can be insufferable, but their talents surpass most mages. At the head of one of the Magiavander factions is none other than the Elven Queen, Eleanor Leos Alf. Leaving that aside, Lihanna informs them that their priority target is the Luminous Nabarus, a monster worth 110 credits. There's only one, so they will be slaying the floor keeper of floor 10. She clarifies that she built this party for the purpose purpose of slaying the Nibiris, because she wants to show the tower that they have the skills to fell a 110 credit monster. In order to achieve that, she wants them to challenge the Nibiris in top form with their magic reserves intact, so they'll take the shortest route to floor 10. The idea of fighting a floor keeper surely intimidates Will, but he only has earned 5 credits until now, so he knows that he has to do this. As they advance through the dungeon, the group finds monster corpses scattered all around for some reason. Will inspects the corpses and notices that there's no evidence of magic, so the monsters were ripped apart with brute strength alone. Lihana informs them that the chamber where the Nabarus appears is up ahead. However, when they reach the chamber, they only find the Nabarus's corpse. Everyone is instantly alarmed, and Lihana orders all members to cast search to see what's going on. The Nabarus's magic traces haven't fully dissipated, so it was only just killed, and they have no idea who did it. Search is an all-purpose spell, but it isn't all-powerful, because mages can use hide to cloak themselves from it, and there's a type of monster capable of evading search magic. Will knows this very well, so he remains alert to their surroundings to detect any noise. The moment he looks up, he warns everyone about the beast just above them, and with his sword, he blocks the attack that takes them by surprise. Wignall suddenly receives a blow, and before any of them can even cast a spell, the monster breaks through the floor, making them all fall in different areas of the dungeon. Will realizes that he's even further below floor 10 now, so they're outside Academy territory, and he's only with Wignall right now. Cyan and Julius fell to floor 11 on their own, and only high mages are allowed to set foot down in such a treacherous place. In addition to this, they were really injured from the fall alone, so the situation couldn't be any worse. Lihana realizes that she's in the Nightmare's Maw, a vast region that stretches all the way to floor 15. The complexity of its structure and strength of its monsters are on another level from all the previous floors. Colette is with her, but they know that if they don't reunite with others, the dungeon will eat them alive. Meanwhile, on floor 8, Professor Eliza Nosferat informs Werkner that a stampede has destroyed their base camp and the other professors have been killed. She doesn't know what killed them, but it looks like something twisted their heads off and all of their handheld masers have been wrecked. They don't know the situation on floor 9 and below, but she'd wager they've fallen into the same chaos. Werkner knows that all of this can't be a coincidence, so it must be some kind of scheme. Edward informs him that the all-student praxis is cancelled because these anomalies are jeopardizing the students and they have to go in right away. Will and Wignall continue advancing through the dungeon, following Kiki's steps. Wignall can't understand how Will can stay so calm under the circumstances, so Will explains that in order to ascend the tower, he has no choice but to take credits by force. He's researched all he can about the dungeon, and he's tried everything he can too. It's not something he's proud of, but he's been stranded on different floors over 100 times, so with that experience, he just knows how to deal with this a little better. Kiki warns them about some monsters ahead, so Will stands on guard, and Wignall takes care of the monster in the back. Will easily slices through the other monsters with his sword, and Wignall is completely blown away by his skills. Another monster suddenly approaches him, so Wignall decides to cast an illusory spell to hide himself, since he doesn't have time to attack. However, Will warns him that that won't work, and Wignall realizes that the monster simply ignored the illusion. He has no way to fight back, so he just screams as the monster is about to kill him. Fortunately, Will takes care of the monster and saves him just in time with only one slash from his sword. He then kindly approaches Wignall to make sure he's okay, and explains that these kind of monsters don't have eyes, so their sense of smell is extremely developed to compensate, and illusions won't work on them. Wignall can do nothing but just laugh and speak with self-deprecation, saying that he's the only one still at the academy after 6 years. The other elves, without exception, have all ascended the tower, so they told him that he's talentless and a disgrace to their kind. The reason is his illusion magic, because it's actually meant to give illusions physical form, but he produces immaterial phantasms, so they can't actually defeat an enemy. Even if he's one of the top 3, Lihana was right to say that those who still remain at the academy are leftovers, so they're inferior. The first one to teach him despair over his inferiority was a milk sibling he was raised alongside in his homeland, the pride of their people, their exalted queen. Eleanor and him grew up together, and he held a deep affection for her, but she's a mighty high elf, one powerful enough to create Kingswood. She became a Magia Vander, and he, in order to reach her, continued to work his hardest on his own, but he's nothing more than a laggard. He desperately tried to hide his own inadequacies, but he's a disgrace of an elf. To his surprise, Will only smiles and tells him that he's always felt like they had something in common. He tries to reassure him, saying that he's an amazing elf, so he'll protect him until he can stand again. Having no other choice, Wignall continues advancing through the dungeon, but he's shocked to see Will defeating over 5 monsters in a flash over and over again like they're nothing. However, to make things even worse, the dungeon suddenly gives birth to a dangerous monster, a deathly Taurus Navaldi. Will immediately uses one of Rosty's magic items and runs with Wignall as fast as he can to evade the explosion. The other monsters around are Balkars, a special type specific to this floor, a variety of notorious monster, worth 11 credits. Physical attacks do nothing against their flaming bodies, and they're also strongly resistant to magic. The only thing effective against them is elven illusion magic, so Will asks Wignall to lend him his strength. Despite the critical situation, Wignall starts crying out of frustration and reminds him that his magic is defective, so he will get it wrong for sure. However, However, Will tells him that they're not geniuses, so if they don't make mistakes, they'll never move forward. He also reminds him that the two of them share a dream, so he won't die because he's going to the tower where Elfaria is waiting. Will doesn't waste any time and starts fighting the Balkars, but his sword isn't having any effect. Wignall tries to help him, but even though his illusion magic doesn't work, Will steps in the way with Kiki to defend him, saying that he has to keep trying. Will assures him that all that effort he's put in until now hasn't been for nothing, and he believes in him. Those words really have an impact on Wignall, because until now, no one ever has believed in him. Will's trust is the one thing he can never betray, so he decides to give it his all, because he'll never give up on Eleanor. For the very first time, Wignall's illusion magic takes a physical form, defeating all the Balkars at once. To Will's surprise, Wignall kneels before him to apologize for his prior rudeness, and tells him that he's now a warrior worthy of his respect. Later, thanks to a special map and Kiki's sense of smell, Will and Wignall advance through the dungeon, though it's been 16 hours since they fell to floor 11. They finally reunite with Cyan and Julius, but Colette and Lehanna don't have the same luck, and they find Professor Bruno instead, who's supposed to be dead. His head suddenly falls, letting them see Headless, an enemy who works with the other assassin, Marze. Headless crushes Bruno's head and informs the girls that they're just their average villains, and they want to destroy the false sky. Just after saying that, Headless throws an attack to slice their heads off, but Will suddenly steps in the way to save them, saying that they found them thanks to the crystals Colette was leaving behind. Headless mentions that it wants to add their heads to its collection, but Marze drags it away, saying that they have to go grab the goods, so there's no time for this. Feeling a little disappointed, Headless decides to let Duke take care of them, so it uses the Mage Queen's secret transportation magic to summon the monster that appeared on floor 10, an evil Grand Duke, worth 270 credits. The group immediately retreats to think about a strategy, but they're all utterly exhausted, battered, and in the worst sort of irrational situation. Despite this, Will tells them that their only recourse is to slay the Grand Duke, because when a lord of baron rank or higher is present, the evil-type monsters establish a domain that can span across multiple floors. But if they take out the lord, they lose their leader, which should open up a way for them to escape. Wignall decides to trust him, and Lehanna realizes that she was mistaken from the beginning, because Will wasn't meant to be their shield, and he was meant to be their leader instead. Everyone puts their trust in him, and Will convinces Julius to help them, saying that he'll teach him a secret magical trick of Elfaria's. This trick allows Julius to cast advanced spells with long incantations thanks to the doubles he creates with Ars Vice. While he does that, the others simply act as decoys, keeping the Duke occupied until Julius begins his bombardment. Everyone follows Will's strategy, and even though the Duke blocks Julius's bombardment, the effects of the ice slows its wings, so Lehanna jumps into action. With her high-speed maneuvering, she's able to slip into close quarters striking range. However, the enemies from before apparently inscribed a spell in advance to create a barrier around the Duke. As soon as she makes contact with it, the barrier turns into offensive mode, so Will quickly moves Lehanna out of the way, and Kiki casts a magic barrier to protect them. Despite this, the attack is so strong that it even breaks through Kiki's barrier, and it completely destroys Will's goggles. Will enters a state of shock after this, and he only snaps out of it after Cyan beats him up. When he sees that Lehanna and Wignall are risking their lives to buy them some time, he immediately runs straight to the Duke to fight it, despite how terrified he is. Everyone joins the battle, fighting with all their strength, but no matter what they do, it isn't enough to defeat such a beast. Will soon realizes that a wand isn't enough to defeat it, and a sword can't slay it. Just then, Rosti remains hidden and throws a crystal at Will, hoping that he remembers, and saying that it's a wand and a sword. Will picks up the crystal, and the memories suddenly flood his mind, making him remember the words from a woman who said that one day, wand and sword will meet and join. He immediately grabs his sword and asks Cyan to use his magic on it. Cyan's fire fuses with Will's sword, leaving everyone in shock, and for a moment, Will's field of vision turns red, and strength wells up inside him. The torrent of power rushing through him prompted him, and before he knows it, he invokes its name, Ignis Weiss. With only one slash of his sword, Will completely cuts the Grand Duke in half. The sword goes back to normal right after that, and it's clear to everyone that Will defeated the Grand Duke himself. However, he doesn't have any strength left, and a horde of sentinels and guards suddenly attacks. Werkner and Edward see everything through Kiki's crystal, so they try to hurry to the place. It's impossible for them to make it in time, but to everyone's surprise, a powerful mage uses a high-level annihilation spell to defeat them all at once. The professors arrive right after that, and everyone immediately recognizes that powerful mage as Aaron Mysterious Old King, the king of the Magia Vander and the most powerful of the wands. Aaron tells them that they have fought well, and the whole group is thrilled to have his praise, because even elves tremble with elation in his presence, and everyone worships him. While everyone is fixated on the Soul Sovereign, Will's eyes are drawn to a boy in his group. This boy actually approaches him and introduces himself as Finn, saying that he's surprised to see that the sword still lives. In another scene, we see that Marzi and Headless managed to retrieve a special sword, so they actually have cleared their mission. And so, the all-students praxis came to a close in an unprecedented manner. There were 11 fatalities, all of them academy professors, and thanks to the efforts of the surviving faculty, there were no student casualties. The school put out a call for any information on the instigators behind the incident, but it has yet to produce any leads. Even though they're still unable to wipe the bad taste from their mouths, the survivors begin their respite. Will is still thinking about the feeling he got when he met Finn, and the girls tell him that he must be part of the Finn tribe. Though their kind can't use magic, over many generations, the little people have gained extensive knowledge of the dungeon. They've had a contract with the tower since the age of the Mage Queen, so they aid them as guides, helping to cover new ground in the labyrinthine dungeon. It's said that without their help, they couldn't reach the deeper floors. Several days later, we see that Finn meets with Cauldron after an expedition where he reached floor 49. He gives her the weapon from the report, the Mage Slayer, the same sword Mars and Headless had retrieved. It is torn to pieces now though, and Finn explains that they ran into an unsavory group on floor 40 and immediately clashed. They killed around 20 of the expedition's high mages, so they took care of them, but he's willing to wager that Mage Slayer wasn't created by the dungeon naturally, which means they're most likely experimenting down there. They began collecting materials deep in the dungeon. Then, by combining different pieces, they created this weapon. Finn mentions that Aaron ordered him to go back into the dungeon to investigate, so he'll leave analyzing that weapon to her. Cauldron accepts the request, but Finn then changes the topic and asks her why she didn't tell him anything about Will, since swords are supposed to be his territory. Cauldron explains that Will actually yearns for a wand, and he intends to ascend the tower to become a Magia Vander. This information surely takes Finn by surprise, because he's never heard of a sword aiming to become a wand. Finn decides to entrust Will to all of them for a little longer, but he warns her that he'll be sticking his nose in from now on. 2 months after the incident, some of the students still haven't come to terms with what happened, but the school year is once again coming to a close. Werkner informs them that for the 6th years, it's time for their actual final exams, so today commences the first day of their graduation exams.